Learn English through stories F44 PDF. Adapted and modified by Kulwant Singh Sandhu. Contents: 1. Selfless Benefactor. 2. Grammar page. 1. Selfless Benefactor by Premchand. It was the month of Savan. Revati Rani colored her feet with henna, did her hair, and then went up to her mother-in-law saying, "Ammaji, today I'll also go to see the fair." Revati was Pandit Chintamani's wife. When the Panditji realized that he was not profiting from worshipping goddess Saraswati, he transferred his devotion to goddess Lakshmi. He lent money to people but, unlike other moneylenders, thought it improper, except in special circumstances, to charge more than 25% interest. Revati's mother-in-law was sitting on the charpoy with a baby in her arms. She replied, "If you get drenched in the rain, the child will catch a cold." "No, Amma, I won't take long. I'll return soon." Revati had 2 children. The first was a boy and the second a girl. The girl was still a babe in her arms. The boy, Haraman, was in his 7th year. Revati dressed the boy in his best clothes and, to protect him from the evil eye, dotted his forehead and cheeks with kajal. She gave him a colorful stick to beat dolls with and set off with her friends for the fair. Beating dolls, a custom at weddings in which the women of the bridegroom's party are playfully beaten with colorful sticks by women from the bride's side. This symbolizes the traditional tussle in a mother-in-law/daughter-in-law relationship. Here it refers to the same custom at a doll's wedding. A large number of women had gathered on the banks of the Kurat Sagar. The sky was overcast with clouds. These women, decked in their finery, were enjoying themselves on the lush green expanse of the bank when it started drizzling. Many swings had been set up on the branches of trees. If some were swinging on them, others were singing songs in Raga Malhar. Yet others were sitting near the water and playing with the waves. The cool and pleasant breeze, the light drizzle, the green hills looking freshly bathed, and the rippling waves charmed everyone. It was the day that the dolls were leaving for their husbands' homes. They were decked in new clothes and jewels. Unmarried girls with hennaed hands and feet had come to bid them goodbye. They had decked them up in new clothes and jewels. They set the dolls afloat in the water and sang songs of Savan. However, as soon as these dolls were out of the protective care of the girls who brought them up with love and affection, they were beaten with sticks. Revati was witnessing this spectacle while Haraman, standing on the steps of the lake along with other girls, was busy beating the dolls. The steps were covered with moss. Suddenly he slipped and fell into the water. Revati shrieked, ran to the spot, and began beating her head. In a second, a big crowd of men and women gathered there, but no one thought of jumping into the water to save the child. Won't their carefully done-up hair become untidy, or their freshly washed dhotis get wet? Many of the men harbored these manly thoughts. 10 minutes passed, but no one summoned the courage. The wretched Revati was totally distraught by now. Suddenly, a traveler on a horse appeared there. Seeing the crowd, he got off the horse and asked one of the spectators, "Why is there such a crowd?" The man answered, "A boy has drowned." "Where?" "Over there, where the woman is weeping." The traveler took off his mursai, tucked in his dhoti, and jumped into the water. There was silence all around. People were wondering who this man was. The man dived in and surfaced with the boy's cap. He dived in a second time and found his stick. After the 3rd dive, when he came to the surface, the boy was in his arms. The spectators broke out into loud applause. The mother ran and clasped the boy tightly in her arms. In the meantime, several friends of Chintamani arrived at the spot and tried to revive the boy. In half an hour the boy opened his eyes. People breathed a collected sigh of relief. The doctor remarked, if the boy had stayed in the water for even 2 more minutes, it would have been impossible to revive him. But when people started looking for the unknown Samaritan, he was nowhere to be seen. Men were sent in all directions, the entire fair was combed, but he could not be found. 20 years passed. Pandit Chintamani's business had over the years flourished. Meanwhile his mother had visited all the 7 pilgrimage sites. A small gate was erected in the temple in her name. Revati had now become a mother-in-law. Hanuman now looked after the transactions and the accounts. He was a tall and hefty young man, of gentle temperament and full of courtesy. At times he would give away money to the needy, without his father's knowledge. This infuriated Chintamani, who warned Hanuman several times, and even threatened to dismiss him from the job. Once Hanuman had contributed 50 rupees for a Sanskrit school. Panditji was so furious that he didn't eat anything for 2 days. Such unpleasant occurrences took place almost every day. It is for these reasons that Hanuman didn't share a cordial relationship with his father. But in all these things, he always had the silent support of his mother. When the poor widows of the small town or those oppressed by the zamindars came to Revati and blessed Hanuman from the depths of their hearts, Revati felt that there was no woman in the world more fortunate than her, and there was no man more virtuous than her son. She would often remember the day when Hanuman had almost drowned in the Kurat Sagar, and the man who had saved the apple of her eye from drowning. The image of that man stood before her, and she blessed him from her heart. She felt if she could just meet the man, she would fall at his feet. She was now convinced that he was not a man but a deity. She would sit on the same small charpoy on which her mother-in-law used to sit and feed both her grandsons. It was Hanuman's 27th birthday. For Revati it was the most auspicious day of the year. She would show utmost generosity on this day, and this was the only extravagance in which Pandit Chintamani also participated. She would be the happiest that day and cry her heart out. Her heart would again bless the unknown Samaritan, and her mind would fill with noble thoughts. It's because of him, she thought, that I have lived to see this day and such happiness. One day Hanuman came to Revati and said, "Ma, Sripur is going to be auctioned off, shall I go and stake a bid?" Revati asked, "The entire village?" Hanuman replied, "Yes, the entire village. It's a good one, neither too large nor too small. It is about 20 miles from here. The bidding has gone up to 20,000. It will end with another 100 or 2. Did you ask your father? Who is the time to argue with him for 2 hours? Hanuman had now become the master of the house, and Chintamani had hardly said in anything. That poor fellow now sat on a mattress, wearing his spectacles and coughing endlessly. The following day Sripur was auctioned off to Hanuman. From a moneylender, Hanuman became a zamindar. He left for the village with his accounts, clerk and 2 attendants. The people of Sripur came when they heard of his arrival. It was the first visit by the new zamindar. Preparations began in every home for making him a suitable mesrana. On the 5th day of his journey, Hanuman entered the village in the evening. They put a tilak on his forehead with curd and rice. About 300 of his tenants stood with folded hands before him till late in the night. In the morning, the manager introduced the tenants to the new zamindar. When they came before him, they laid at his feet offerings of a rupee or 2, according to their abilities. By noon, about 500 rupees had piled up before the zamindar. Hanuman tasted for the first time the joy of being a zamindar. He felt the intoxication of wealth and power. Of all addictions, there is none more deadly than wealth. When the line of tenants came to an end, he asked the manager, "Is there anyone left?" The manager replied, "Yes, my lord, there's one left, Takht Singh. Why didn't he come?" "He is somewhat eccentric." "I'll put an end to all his eccentricities. Send someone to fetch him." After a little while an old man appeared leaning on a stick, touched his feet and squatted on the ground. He had not brought any offering. Seeing his audacity, Hanuman went into a rage. He thundered, "It seems you haven't dealt with a zamindar before, you'll forget all your arrogance." Takht Singh looked closely at Hanuman and said, "I have seen 20 zamindars come and go, but none threatened me like this." Saying this, he picked up his stick and returned home. His wife asked, "Did you see the zamindar? What kind of man is he?" Takht Singh replied, "He is a nice man, I could recognize him. Have you met him earlier?" "I have known him for 20 years. Don't you remember the incident that occurred during the Dal's fair?" After that day, Takht Singh never went to Hanuman again. 6 months later, Revati felt the urge to visit Sripur. She arrived there along with her daughter-in-law and children. All the women of the village came to see her. Takht Singh's aged wife was also with them. Revati was surprised by the way she talked and her decent ways. When she was leaving, Revati said to her, "Thakurain, do come and visit me sometime. I was very pleased to meet you." In this way, these two women established a bond. Meanwhile, Haruman, at the instigation of his manager, was conspiring to dispossess Takht Singh of his land. It was the night of the full moon in the month of Jyeshtha. Preparations were afoot for Haruman's birthday celebrations. Revati was sifting flour when the old Thakurain arrived. Revati smiled at her and said, "Thakurain, you are invited to come here tomorrow." Thakurain replied, "I will certainly come. Which anniversary is this? The 29th one?" Thakurain said, "God bless you, may you see many such birthdays." Thakurain, "Thank you for your blessing. I've performed all kinds of rituals and now this day has dawned." He almost died when he was 7 years old. We had gone to the doll's fair and he had fallen into the water. A Mahatma saved his life. Haruman's life is this Mahatma's gift. We searched for him everywhere, but in vain. On every birthday, I put away 100 rupees in the Mahatma's name. It has now become a little over 2,000. My son intends to build a temple in Sripur in his name. To tell you the truth, if I could set my eyes on him just once, I would feel that my life has attained its purpose. My longing would be fulfilled. When Revati stopped, she saw tears streaming down the Thakurain's eyes. On the following day, two events were taking place simultaneously, the celebration of Haruman's birthday and the auctioning of Takht Singh's fields. The Thakurain said, "I'm going to Revati Rani to seek her mercy." "Not as long as I'm alive," Takht Singh stopped her. The month of Asar came. The rain god was very generous. The peasants of Sripur started cultivating their fields. Takht Singh's eyes followed them wistfully. Takht Singh had a cow. He grazed her all day long. This was the only support he had in his life. He eked out a living by selling milk and cow dung cakes. He had to starve at times but never approached Haruman for help. Haruman had tried to humiliate him before others, but the reverse had happened. His apparent victory was in fact his defeat. He could not bend the old man with his obdurate arrogance. One day Revati said, "Son, you've harassed a poor man, that's not good." Haruman lost his temper and replied, "He's not a poor man, I will smash his arrogance." Intoxicated by wealth, the zamindar was trying to smash something that did not exist. He was like an unthinking child fighting his own shadow. Takht Singh somehow managed to survive for a year. The rainy season came once again. The thatched roof on his house was not repaired. It rained continuously for a couple of days, and a part of his house caved in. The cow was tethered there and it died under the debris. Takht Singh was badly wounded. He began to run a fever from that day. There was no one to bring him medicine, his only means of livelihood was also lost. The ruthless calamity totally crushed him. His house was flooded with water. There was not a grain in the house. He was groaning in pain in the dark when Revati arrived there. Takht Singh opened his eyes and asked, "Who is it?" The Thakurain replied, "It is Revati Rani." Takht Singh said, "I thank my stars, you're so kind to me." Revati replied in an embarrassed tone, "Thakurain, God knows I'm surprised by my son's behavior. Tell me about your difficulties, you have fallen on such evil times and yet you didn't even inform me." Saying this, Revati placed a small pouch containing money before the Thakurain. Hearing the jingle of money, Takht Singh got up and said, "Lady, we don't hanker for money, don't make a sin in my last days." The following day, Haruman also appeared there, along with his cronies. He smiled at the sight of the dilapidated house. "In the end I smashed his pride," he thought to himself. He went inside the house and asked, "Thakur, how are you now?" The Thakur replied feebly, "All's well, by God's grace, how did you happen to come here?" Haruman felt worsted once again. He had expected that Takht Singh would prostrate before him. But this desire of his remained unfulfilled. That night, The poor, independent and honest Takht Singh departed from this world. The old Thakurain was left alone in the world. There was no one to share her grief or mourn her death. Poverty had sharpened the intensity of sorrow. Material possessions may not compensate for the loss of a dear departed, but they certainly can lessen the pain. Worry for one's daily bread is a great curse. The Thakurain would now scour for cow dung in fields and pastures to make and sell cakes. It was a pitiable sight to see her going to the field with her walking stick and returning with a basket of cow dung on her head, panting for breath. Even Hanuman felt pity for her. One day he had some wheat, pulses and rice sent to her. Revati herself carried the platters to her house. But the old woman said with tearful eyes, "Revati, as long as I can see with my eyes and use my limbs, don't make me and my dead husband sinners." After that day, Hanuman never dared to show sympathy to her. One day Revati bought cow dung cakes from the Thakurain. The going rate was 30 cakes per paisa. Revati, however, wanted to take only 20 cakes from her. From that day, the Thakurain stopped selling cow dung cakes to her. Such virtuous women were indeed rare in the world. The Thakurain knew that if she revealed but one secret, all her troubles would come to an end. But that would mean claiming reward for a good deed. As the proverb goes, do a good deed and forget about it. Probably it never occurred to the Thakurain that she had done Revati a favor. This self-respecting and honorable woman lived for 3 years after her husband's death. She spent this period of her life in extreme distress. Sometimes she had to starve for days. Sometimes she could not find any cow dung, sometimes her cow dung cakes were stolen. It was all God's will. Some families have so much and no one to eat, while some others spend their lives begging and weeping. The old woman bore all this but never sought any help. It was Hanuman's 30th birthday. One could hear the drum beats. On one side, puris were being fried in ghee, on the other in oil. Those fried in ghee were for the fat and honorable Brahmins, those in oil were for the starving wretches. Suddenly a woman came to Revati and said, "Something's wrong with the Thakurain, she has sent for you." Revati said in her heart, "God, may this day pass without mishap, let not the old woman die today." Thinking this, she didn't go to the old woman. When Hanuman saw that his mother was not willing to go, he went there himself. For the past few days he had felt pity for the woman. But Revati came to the door to restrain him from leaving. This was the kind-hearted, good-tempered and decent Revati. When Hanuman reached the Thakurain's house, he found it completely desolate. The Thakurain's face had gone pale, and she was in the throes of death. Hanuman said loudly, "Thakurain, it's me, Hanuman." The Thakurain opened her eyes and beckoned him to come close. Then she said haltingly, "In the basket near my head are the Thakur's ashes, there's also the sindoor I had worn on my wedding day. Please send both to Prayagraj." Saying this, she closed her eyes. Hanuman opened the basket to find both the objects kept neatly in it. There was also a 10-rupee note in an envelope. This was probably kept there to cover the expenses of the last rites. At night, the Thakurain was released from her sufferings forever. That very night Revati had a dream. It was the Savan fair, the sky was overcast, and she was on the bank of the Kurat Sagar. Right at that moment Hanuman slipped into the water. She began to cry and beat her chest. Suddenly an old man jumped into the water and brought Hanuman back. Revati fell at his feet and said, "Who are you?" The man said, "I live in Sripur, my name is Takht Singh." Sripur is still in Hanuman's possession. But now it has been transformed. From a distance one can see the golden orb at the top of the Shiva temple. This temple has been built at the very spot where Takht Singh lived. Right in front of it there is a paved well and a dharamshala. Travelers stay there and remember Takht Singh. The Shiva temple and the dharamshala are named after him. 2. Grammar page.